Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. We're back at it again. This is episode 128, and we have with us Caitlyn Anders, social worker extraordinaire. Caitlyn's one of those people who has come onto staff, and man, she has just done such an amazing job with all the kids that she works with, the adults she works with. She has been a huge encouragement to me in just my work and being a leader. Caitlyn, you've been awesome to have on staff so far. And I know we'll continue to. She's badgering me right now to send her all the nonprofit paperwork so she can help me get that stuff going. So you're doing an amazing job. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're going to get to talk about some of this stuff. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about you, your story, and then how you became a social worker and got to Clint Davis Counseling.
All right. I grew up in a very small town in the northeast corner of Louisiana called Bastrop. Oh, Bastrop. It's very fun and very crazy. But I grew up with my mom. She is my absolute best friend. My grandparents are my solid supports, really good friends. Grew up in church all around. I think I did every VBS like every summer until I hit middle school and wasn't allowed to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of churches for a small town, so it was a lot of weeks, and most time was doubled up. So very, very supportive. Had a lot of supports around my life. But in high school, I think is when I started feeling a lot of these things, had a lot of thoughts of like suicide and not feeling like anyone was there, even though I definitely had great family, I had great friends. And so I had a friend who actually passed away from suicide, and my freshman year of high school, when I was 16, I told my mom that is what, I just didn't want to live anymore. And we tried different medicines, and then I actually landed in the hospital by start of my junior year. And it sucked. It was not fun, but it's exactly what I needed at that time. I just didn't like that, and I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very thankful. I had an amazing, amazing therapist at the time who she integrated a lot of spirituality and God within our sessions, it was such an amazing thing that I very deeply appreciate now. And so being on this side of it, I definitely understand where she had to do what she did. But as a 16-year-old, I hated it.
You mean as putting you inpatient?
Yeah, it was, I definitely did not like it at the time.
Yeah, sure.
But on this side of it, I definitely understand why. She had absolute right. I wrote a detailed note, told a friend how I was going to do it. So, yeah, it was definitely the right call. And I can see that now many years afterwards. I started dating this really great guy who is now my husband. He is my number one best friend, the coolest guy ever. And we moved on down after graduating, after he graduated pharmacy school in 2020. Before that, I graduated with a bachelor's in English. And then I graduated in 2019 with a master's of public administration, because I wanted to do nonprofit work and do grant writing. And we moved. I was pregnant at the time with our kid. And it was a rough thing. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when we moved here to Shreveport. And a friend of mine was in the Master's of Social Work program at LSU, and she told me how much she loved it, the professors, the program, and she was like, maybe you should look into it. You can do so many things with a social work degree. And I was like, I had no idea. I just thought you worked for DCFS,
right?
If that. And so
that's the only thing.
That's all we do. It's just DCFS. That's it. I talked to my program director at with my MPA, and she was like, Caitlyn, this is the best thing ever. You should absolutely do that. You could do so many great things with, on the broader scale. And I was like, absolutely. I don't want to do anything direct work. I don't want to see people one-on-one. That's just not me. And because it's just really funny how all of things works out. I did two internships really, where I did some one-on-one work with adolescents and with kids, a little bit of some adults. And I fell in love with working with someone one-on-one, which was just hilarious. So as graduation came, I graduated in August 23, and the more and more I wrestled with it when I was praying with God about it, when I was talking to my husband, with friends, I was like, I think I'm just going to work one-on-one. Like, I think that's where I'm going to start. Get my hours, go from a licensed master social worker to licensed clinical social worker, and it'll just open up more doors. A friend of mine who also works for Clinton Davis Counseling, Morgan Nichols.
Shout out to Morgan.
Yeah, Morgan's the best. She
Gotta
totally
get her
got me
on
this
the
job.
podcast, Morgan. You hear this?
Yeah, you got to come in down. I did it. You did it.
That's right.
She told me that, of what she gets to do, working with kids, working with families, adults. And she was like, I'll just put a bug in, Clint's ear that you want to work with kids, because we always need people that work with kids. And, man, it worked out. I think I interviewed with you right before or right after I passed my licensing exam, which was stress all around, and started. So
been crushing it ever since.
Thanks. I feel like that sometimes.
Yeah, good. You've been doing a great job. We meet on Tuesdays every other week and talk through theology and psychology and play therapy and all the things. And it's been really fun this last 6 months, 7 months of like me and you and Morgan and anybody else who joins us. Krista, you're if you're listening to this, you need to show up regularly. Anyway, so we're dealing with your story and working through the kind of teen suicide. I think, we talked about that'd be a good topic for us to talk about. So as a play therapist, working with kids, and then as a teen who struggle with that, what are some of the things that you, want people to know or about that subject? And, I know some of the statistics, but I'll let you shout them out. So
absolutely.
Blank slate.
The biggest thing is that if you talk about it, or if you ask questions about it, especially with your kids, and when I say adolescents, I do speak specifically 10-year-olds to 19-year-olds. But whenever you're talking with them, it's not entirely planting the idea in their head, which I know a lot of people think about that as like, well, I don't want to say like, are you hurting yourself? Because maybe they were never thinking about it. Well, they read it a lot. They hear about it with school, with their friends. It's in so much of media and what we watch, what we listen to. So they're already exposed to it. Most of the time they don't have a language to it. And so what happens is they have to deal with that or wrestle with that on their own, and not even counting any other maybe strains on relationships or dynamics with parents that further make a kid feel lonely and kind of hopeless. And so a lot of, man, it's like this, I think it's the second leading cause of death in ages 10 to 14, which is mind blowing, because I can't imagine like 10-year-olds, but then I can, because I see them in my office. But man, just the taboo nature of it, which is why when I especially when I see parents and I see kids, I tell them like, we can talk about it. It doesn't automatically mean that we go call Brentwood and you get locked up. That's not what happens. We talk about it, we discuss it. Now, if there's the clear intent, there's a clear plan, like they have like a clear direction, then yeah, we do have to go to higher care. But most of the time they just need to talk about it or know that they're just not alone. And that's probably just the biggest thing, not only for kids, but even adults, of just knowing they're not alone.
Yeah, I think it's really scary for parents when their kids say things about, I'm going to kill myself, I want to not be here, I don't want to live. I mean, that would be, I would say that's the biggest fear that we have, is like losing a child as a parent. Absolutely. So how do you help people navigate that, or what would you want people to know as a parent? What could lead a kid to actual suicide? Like, is there a level of like, I've heard it said, people will say, oh, they're just saying that for attention, right? What would you say to that?
I would say if they're saying it for attention, it's probably for a reason, because they're needing someone to bring attention to it. That's actually what I did with my mom when I was 16, and I just laid in my bed. She asked me what was wrong, and I was like, I don't know. I just don't really want to be alive anymore. Just kind of want to stop existing. And she, man, shout out to Brandy, because she's the best as well. She listened to me. We tried to talk about things, but she didn't know where to go. She didn't know what to do. And so the one thing she did know is she took me to my doctor at that time, and we started doing like some antidepressants, but he also connected me with a therapist. And that's one of the biggest things. I always commend parents, especially when their kids have these conversations of, it's awesome that you bring them to someone, because maybe you don't know what to say. or maybe it just scares the crap out of you, because that is terrifying to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd encourage people, if your child is saying, or an adult is saying, and let's just say this up front. If we're talking about children, but you can just take it. And so I don't want to say or an adult every time. But if a kid's saying, I don't want to be here, I don't want to live anymore, the fact that they're saying that to you and they haven't killed themselves is a huge blessing, and also opportunity to realize it's not a crisis. Mm-hmm. It is a crisis in the overall view.
Right.
But I think parents panic, right? And they get nervous and they get overwhelmed, and their nervous system starts, cortisol starts kicking, and they get afraid. So they don't know what to do in that moment. So what would you say if a kid says, hey, I'm feeling like I don't want to live anymore? How does a parent remain calm? And then what are some things they could say to that kid, and maybe what are some things they shouldn't say to that kid in that moment?
Definitely don't say that you're blowing this out of proportion, or you're just doing this for attention, or any type of dismissing or ignoring it.
Why not?
Because it just further makes that kid feel helpless, hopeless, and especially from a parent, if it's a parent that's saying, well, that's not, like, why would you feel that way because of this situation? It's like, well, I mean, they don't even listen, or maybe they don't even care. Maybe that is my only option. Like, I just want all of this to stop.
Right. So it can actually double down the idea that, like, I'm trying to express my pain here.
Right.
I'm a kid. I don't know how to do that. I'm a teenager. I don't know how to do that.
Right.
Maybe I have something bigger I need to unload, but I'm kind of testing the waters here. And now you're communicating to me already. Your feelings aren't valid. You shouldn't feel that way. This is unreasonable.
Yeah.
So why would I tell you anymore?
Exactly. And then it's a big, well, they did this, they completed suicide. And it's like, I had no idea this was completely out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Whereas maybe 2 weeks ago, they came to you talking about friend problems, or how maybe it was friend problems on top of school being really difficult, on top of being bullied a little bit, on top of things going on at home. And it's so overwhelming that for kids, especially kids, like, just don't know where else to go. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, well, if I could just make all this stop, that would be great, because then I could breathe. So logically, kind of not logically, like, this is the only option I can think of, because obviously I can't stop going to school. I can't stop living at home, can't stop doing this or that. And so it kind of becomes your only option. And then if you further lose someone to listen to with that pain, or maybe not even try to solve it, but just to actually listen, then you're dangerously alone.
Yeah, so the first thing that people need to do if somebody's expressing that they're suicidal is to ask questions, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some questions they could ask in that moment?
Especially for a parent that maybe their kid comes up to them and says this, ask if something's been happening. Is there something with school? Kind of just digging deeper and maybe trying to find the different things that are leading to this. Mm-hmm. Especially remaining as calm as possible, and trying not to blame, but to just to figure it out. Like, if there's things that y'all like to do that make you feel better already, then say, like, all right, well, if you like to go for a walk, like, well, how about we go walk and talk about this? The biggest thing, or one of the other biggest things for parents, is sometimes just shut up and just let them talk about it. Mm-hmm. Children from toddlers to adolescents, they feel the same emotions we do as adults, as just intense as we do. But a lot of times when we look at it from an adult perspective, it's like, okay, but that's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. But to them, it is a big deal. They could feel disappointment at the same level that you feel disappointment when you lose your job, mm-hmm. or someone doesn't follow through on a plan. And so they feel that too, but they also have someone else telling them, well, it's not that big a deal. Like, friends don't do this all the time. And it's like, okay, but that doesn't make me feel better.
Right. Yeah. I think that's great. Earlier you said logical, but not logical. And I think that's key to remember for kids, is that their brain's super underdeveloped.
So underdeveloped.
So they have no prefrontal that helps them think rationally and helps them mold the irrational with the rational. And so telling a kid that's irrational, like, is unhelpful, because of course it is. Like, no matter how rational they're trying to be, they're incapable of thinking like you do.
Right.
And so when a kid is worked up and they're sad and depressed and anxious and they're nervous and they're feeling suicidal, or they're feeling like they don't want to be there, they are in a state of irrational thinking to some degree.
Yeah.
Because we do not want to use a permanent solution for a temporary problem. But when you go into those moments, you have to earn the ability to speak truth to them.
Absolutely.
You know, parents need to not panic, understand like suicidality more, understand why a child would say that, which is why we're doing this podcast.
Absolutely.
So that we can go, okay, if this happens, I already know the story. I know what to do. I know who to go to. I know the resources to support. I know the outcomes that can be there. I kind of have this safety net around me. So now that helps me be calm so I can tend to this situation appropriately. But most people don't have those resources and those things. So of course a parent hears that and they just want it to stop too.
Right.
Now they're dysregulated. And so they just want this whole thing to go away.
Absolutely.
And so if I just speak rationally to you and say, hey, listen, I know your boyfriend broke up with you, but boyfriends break up with you, and get over it. And there's no sense in killing yourself over it. You'll find another boy. No teenage girl is going to go, oh, thanks, Mom. You're right. You know,
makes total sense.
yeah.
I feel so much better now.
Exactly. What's going to happen is they're going to get more dysregulated, and then they're going to go, well, not talking to you about this.
Right.
You're right, Mom. A lot of times they might even give you that back.
Right.
They might tell you what you want to hear.
But then internally, and as they continue, as when they're alone, when they're trying to speak or figure out who else they can talk to about this, it's, well, my mom doesn't listen to me. Okay, well, she's off. Well, okay, my dad doesn't listen to me. He's off. Well, I mean, I guess my grandparents, but not really. They don't understand. So I've already, that's like 4 or even more people that you've already lost as a connection to talk to and feel supportive. Mm-hmm. And as that circle gets closer and closer and smaller, I mean, you really don't have, it doesn't look like there's more options.
Right.
And a lot of that, I know for me personally, it didn't look like there was options available. It didn't seem like I could talk to my mom or I could talk to my dad, or even, I mean, I was dating someone at the time and I mentioned it to him. He said very encouraging, like, I'd love if you stay here. But even that, like, that wasn't enough. It was just like one person at one point made a comment, but not seeing any other signs or any other things and not intervening. Mm-hmm. And so that was my only option until I, like, the last ditch effort of, I just don't want to be alive anymore. And then further, when I wrote that to a friend, of a detailed plan of what I was going to do after school.
Yeah. So we know that since 2010, the suicide rate has increased like 176% in teens, mm-hmm. and self-harm's increased a ton. What do you attribute that to?
So much pressure, so much. I say a lot of on-the-go busyness, tons of pressure with school, with careers, especially as teens get closer to graduating in college. Like, well, what are you going to do with your life? Maybe it's just with sports. Many people want to be like the next Drew Brees, but honestly, they're not. Their career is going to end in high school. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it might end freshman year of high school. And then it's like, if this is all you're riding on, where do I go from here? A lot of maybe trying to be good enough if there's a lot of things going on at home. The struggle of being a kid, but also expecting to be an adult and not knowing where that balance is. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that, as well as social media, the more access you have, especially like unrestricted access, it's just so dangerous because you're having like 10-year-olds also talking with 40-year-olds that are also playing a game with like a 30-year-old. And so not everyone's going to be speaking nice to each other or encouraging. And if you don't know how to deal with that or how to handle that, or even because your brain is just not developed enough, you're going to go illogically, mm-hmm. just to a solution that maybe is not the best solution. So I would say a lot, definitely just with, I know it's definitely a lot of problems attributed to it, but with social media and just the pressure we put on kids, on ourselves and on our kids. Maybe it's for your own defined expectations of what you wanted them when they came out of the womb, but they're their whole person, and that's hard to contend with.
I think one of the things that it's hard to talk about when it comes to teen suicide, one, is I want to be very sensitive to any parents that are out there who have lost their child to teen suicide, and that they don't feel blamed.
Right.
That somebody would say, oh, it's your fault. But to look at the scope of suicide and prevent things, then we have to look at what are the causes. Mm-hmm. And so this is a case-by-case situation, obviously. We're not going to give generalities. But I think you're right that there are things that if we pay attention to that can prevent suicide. Because if there's not, it's terrified to contend with, because you can have a perfect natural life and then all of a sudden you're 16 and you just decide to kill yourself. I think sometimes that can happen when there's a chemical imbalance, when there's like some kind of psychological break. But most likely something's happened over time, or some big things, big T traumas, that would then change the chemistry and their view of themselves that then lead to suicide. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So I say that because I think it's really important for parents to be aware that these little things that you allow or that you don't have conversations about build.
Absolutely.
And so it's isolated to go, oh, everything was great. They had a great life, and now they're 14 and they're suicidal. That's like a diamond in the rough kind of thing. That's like maybe not a great analogy, a needle in the haystack. Like the more likely is that they went through a lot of things that they emotionally didn't know how to deal with, that built over time, neurological deficits, chemistry changes, and cultural changes that then led to just this mounting kind of emotional fear and anxiety. And then typically relational triggers and cues that then they felt hopeless, helpless, and hapless with. And now we're off to the races.
Yeah, very much. Especially if there's that history of family history with anxiety and depression. Or if they, and not even or, but and if they also have already been diagnosed with anxiety, depression, or bipolar disorder, any of those, they do have a higher risk. So very much not always just out of the blue, like you said.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. I also think parents need to realize that we're dealing with different human beings than have ever been.
Right.
That the children that we're birthing in the last decade, their cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, their anxiety levels, their depression rate, their predispositions to depression and anxiety, their epigenetical changes around addiction. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just all of those levels just at birth are way higher than they were for any other human being. So we're not having the same kids that we were having 10 and 20 years ago, because for 40 years, really, since, World War II and Industrial Revolution, we've had these kids who are being birthed under a level of stress that no other humans have been, really under. And then they're being exposed to content and things, like you said, on social media, videos, drugs, food, sugars,
Absolutely.
I mean, even pleasures that have changed. By the time they're teenagers, they have experienced in 2024 a world, and their bodies and their minds and their spirits have experienced such a higher level of things than any other human being. So I think that has a lot to do with their increased kind of self-loathing, because suicide is, I hate myself enough, or I feel helpless enough, or hopeless enough, or things keep happening enough that I see no way out. And the best solution is to take my life.
Absolutely.
And I think that we have to be very mindful that everything we let our kids be exposed to and experience, right? It puts things on a scale. Yeah.
And being there and listening, as first line of defense to help, but it's hard. It's hard being a kid. It's hard being an adult. Everyone's struggling. Mm-hmm. But most times a lot of kids have a lot harder because they don't have the language with it. They don't always feel or maybe perceive that there is any adult in their corner or listening, or just wants to let them rant about some crazy guy that broke their heart. Mm-hmm. And how dare they, how unfair that is. And, or maybe it's, I should have played better during this game. The world is ending because I cost our school the championship game. In the long run, it doesn't matter, but it also does, because those kids that don't complete suicide as in their adolescence, they grow up to be adults that still struggle with those same things. And because they went so long without maybe coping skills or having someone they know they can supportively go to time and time again, that isolation, that loneliness, that helplessness just feeds and grows. As adults, you get more withdrawn or more separated from your family of origin, from maybe like some people from your town of origin. And so starting over is really difficult on top of having to navigate your own brain.
Yeah, and I think kids don't understand forever anyway. You know, that's the big problem. At least as adults, we can go, okay, I've survived this before. I'll get over this again. You know, we've lost jobs. We've lost, you know, we've gotten injured. We've had sicknesses. We've had deaths. We've survived a lot. But as kids, I mean, they have no clue that things last forever.
Right.
Or they think they last forever. It's like these kind of juxtapositions. So they at the same time post something on Facebook or Instagram, not Facebook because teenagers don't post on Facebook, but
True.
Instagram or, you know, Snapchat or whatever it is that they're, you know, posting on, thinking nothing about who can share it, who can see it, how long it'll be on there.
Yeah.
While at the same time, they think, oh, this boyfriend that I have or this girlfriend that I have or this career that I'm going to in sports, I sprained my ankle and I missed this party.
Right.
It's over. So it's such an interesting kind of juxtaposition because it's like they can't see in the future, but they also obsess about like things being forever.
Right.
So parents have to realize like that is a normal part of development for a teenager. So it's important for us to be involved in that kid's life and discipling them and teaching them about emotions and having conversations about feelings and teaching them about feelings. So by the time we get to the teenage years, man, we have this, you know, wealth of relationship with them that can hold these heavy things.
Absolutely. And I love to tell this to parents too, the greatest thing is that it's not too late. It's absolutely never too late. And so even if you don't have that, like with your kids being super young, if you're bringing them in maybe for counseling and they're 16 or they're 15 or they're 14, that's still way more time that they're going to have to have someone know someone else is in their corner, and to know like that maybe you don't have all the answers as an adult, as a parent. So you go to someone that can help with things, which is such an invaluable thing that is not always direct. Maybe it's never really directly communicated. And so, but that's such a great thing to have. And so, whether, you know, any parents that listen, that it's not, maybe your kid is 18 or maybe they're 17, it's not too late already. And that's the great thing about different therapies that, you know, are available. You can have, your kid can go to therapy just themselves, or even you can do family therapy. You can go, like, you don't necessarily have to make them or have them go to a counselor. You could go to a counselor because it's terrifying, and especially of not wanting to further hurt your kid. Like you're going to try and figure out what's best. And that's the best thing, is to try and to go to someone or try different things that maybe can help.
Yeah, we're not supposed to do all this alone.
Absolutely not.
Know? So as parents, when we think, oh, I can't tell anybody that my kid's suicidal.
Oh, no.
You know, I can't tell anybody that my kid's depressed. I can't tell anybody that my kid's anxious. I think one of the major problems is that we parent in a very narcissistic way because we think everything that our kid is doing and dealing with has to do with us, good and bad.
Right.
So I don't want to share this with my pastor or my church or their school, because they're going to think, well, what have they done or what have they not done to get to the situation? And I think that's where counseling and support and pastoral care comes in, because maybe you have done some stuff. Maybe you haven't done some stuff. You know, maybe there's things you've done and said that have contributed to them feeling like crap and feeling suicidal and feeling hopeless, and you need to repair that.
Yeah.
Maybe some things that you didn't know you should have done that you missed that now you need to do. So I think sometimes facing these problems means taking personal responsibility as parents. And sometimes we feel overwhelmed by that because we have our own trauma.
Right.
Nobody ever validated our feelings or helped us understand our, you know, emotions. Nobody ever, you know, helped us recover from our traumas. And yet here we are parenting and raising this kid in this crazy world, and we have no clue what we're doing, and we're angry. Sometimes we're angry that our kid is getting all this support and all this love. And if they only knew what it was like for us, and if they only understood how easy their life is. And so they start sharing these things that are difficult and heavy. And parents are like, man, you need to suck it up. You need to, you know, understand what it was like for me. You don't have it bad at all. I pay for this, I pay for that. I mean, I've heard this 100 times. I know you have too.
Yeah.
It's like those are the last things that kids need to hear because they're not you.
Yeah.
They didn't have your life. You're right. And you are the parent, so you guided them into that. And you either guided them into it in the good way or the bad way, and a mix of both. So as parents, we have to take responsibility. The other side is that you can do everything right as a parent, and your kid's still going to struggle. I mean, Grady is my oldest. He's almost 10. And there's been multiple times where he's been like, I'm going to kill myself, or I hate myself, or I deserve to go to hell. He doesn't know what that means.
Right.
Right? He doesn't understand it. But as a therapist, I'm like, dang, my freaking kid's saying this in the living room over like us making him go to bed early, or he can't have another snack, or whatever the thing is. We've got to have enough education and knowledge and support where if you don't know it, you can ask somebody who's healthy, and they can say, okay, not all kids say that, but a lot more kids say that than not. And some of that is temperament.
Absolutely.
Right? Some of that's personality.
Absolutely.
Little introverted kids who are quiet and very sweet and docile, they're probably not going to be the ones who, when they're upset, scream, I'm going to kill myself. They're going to internalize it.
Absolutely.
You know, where my kids are extroverted, they're going to just say the thing they're thinking. Neither are fun to deal with, but one looks a lot worse than others. And so I would say, if you have a teenager, know your kid's temperament too and their personality. So how do you think that plays into like when it comes to personality, but also just boys and girls and suicide? How does that vary?
So like statistically with the different numbers, girls, let me see, girls think and actually attempt suicide more. And actually I think it's twice as often as boys. They usually are either overdosing or they're cutting themselves. But on the flip side, boys actually complete suicide at 4 times the rate as girls because they use more lethal means. Mm-hmm. And so they're usually, with their methods, it's gonna last. It's not gonna come back.
Yeah.
So like one of those is, I know the risk is it increases so much when there is access to like a firearm within the house. Doesn't mean you have to like throw them out, but make sure they're locked. They're kept stored securely away. That can decrease the rate so fast already. Mm-hmm. But then just knowing like, okay, even if a girl isn't maybe putting a gun to her head or something like that, doesn't mean that maybe she's not cutting herself with a kitchen knife before school, or she's not like burning herself with erasers on her arms or anything like that. Or
is self-harm like an indicator or kind of prerequisite to suicide, or does it lead to that? Is it like the gateway drug? I mean, I've heard, several different things. What do you think about that?
I don't think it's a prerequisite, but from my own experience and from just studying it and hearing from other stories, like it kind of goes hand in hand. It's, it's kind of the temporary relief that you can get at the moment. But like, I mean, even like taking drugs, like it's going to end at some point. And so you either keep cutting yourself or you keep harming yourself, or you keep escalating because you need to feel something.
Yeah. So self-harm, cutting, body mutilation, plucking your eyebrows. There's 100 different ways. Mm-hmm. People do all kinds of things that are self-harm. Mm-hmm. You would say that points to a deeper emotional problem deficit that needs to be tended to. And if it doesn't get tended to, then it can certainly lead over into hating yourself enough or destroying yourself enough to, fully complete suicide but not everybody who is cutting is suicidal.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think a lot of times with churches, especially in schools, right out, we've gotten this where people call in, they're cutting and they're just freaking out. They need to go to Brentwood. We need to put them inpatient. It's like, hold on. Let's assess, what's going on. And is this temporary pain relief? Is this a dopamine drip? What's going on with this? And so that's, again, I'd reiterate to parents, if you find yourself, with a kid who's self-harming or cutting or doing something to their body or anything that's destructive, don't freak out. Be calm. You could call us and freak out.
Absolutely.
Call your pastor, call us, freak out with your spouse. But when you go to engage with them, try to, find out what it is, what's the pain point, what's going on. If they don't know, then they need help figuring it out. They need some play therapy. They need to do some sand tray. They need to do some equine. They need to do some art therapy or music therapy, something that can help them to process things that are unprocessed, that they don't have a clue about what's going on. A 13-year-old doesn't have a whole lot of language around emotions and feelings and the deeper roots of life.
Right.
So we need things that they can participate in. So can you talk about a little bit about that, like why play therapy? Because I think you've told me this before, like a parent comes in with a 13-year-old, like, you're just going to play with them for an hour for $150, whatever. Talk about play therapy just a little bit and why that's so beneficial to some of those things I was talking about.
Absolutely. So, especially using like play and art, if anyone ever comes in my room, you'll see I have one giant wall that's just filled with artwork, that are all my clients. They have done that. Mine just stay on my side. But, those are different ways of being able to express and process things. Kids naturally, even at like 10 years old, they will naturally play. It's things that they love to do, whether that's, video games, or it's playing with Barbie dolls, or playing with race cars, or maybe with art, it's doodling or painting or splattering things. Like it's a natural thing. It's also a great way to release stress or whatever you're feeling built up. And so the more you're able to healthily release, maybe it's anger or sadness or like disappointment, the more you get language to it, the more it doesn't stay stuck in you and it doesn't stay buried. And so as relationships change, relationship problems happen with maybe dynamic changes at home, like if parents are going to go through a divorce, or even with kids that have parents in the military, one of their parent is going to leave for an extended period of time, then they're able to knowingly go to something. They're like, okay, well, I know if I like take a deep breath and I think about whatever I'm feeling, okay, there's a picture that's coming up. Awesome. I'm going to put that on a canvas, or I'm going to put it on a paper. You can write it out or draw something. And then I've had one client, we wrote like different things that were swirling around in her head, and then we ripped up the paper. She looked at me crazy for a second, and I'm like, just trust me, just do it, just however many times. She ripped it up to tiny shreds and goes, wow, I feel a lot better. I'm like, yeah, you got it out, and then you got to do something.
So why is that so beneficial? Why would a parent would come in and say, I need you to talk to them and fix them and adjust these things?
So I definitely don't adjust and fix, which is my fun thing. I love to tell parents too. But because the brains are so underdeveloped until like late 20s, I think 30s now, as the research says, like their prefrontal cortex, where you're going to get all that information, where you're going to talk it through and be able to think logically and rationally, that thing's not really working. It's like a little bit online, but it's very much on the fritz, and it's not really computing. So being able to do some art things, or being able to play games, like being able to play Uno, man, I've had some deep and amazing like conversations with kids because it naturally comes out. It also helps to have your hands moving and doing something. I know that's part of like EMDR, is being able to stimulate both sides of your brain. We get to do that with doing different artworks or playing different things. Like you figure out what they're trying to say, as well as you make it less pressure. Because especially in my room, I lose a lot to Uno. It's ashamedly, I get beat a bunch, but it's very funny that kids get to feel really empowered, and they get to go, oh yeah, I totally demolished you like 3 games. This is awesome. Nice. And so with that, it's like less pressure to say the right thing or do the right thing. And so it comes out just very naturally. It's really helpful that you can have some amazing conversations as you look at a picture and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what is this color, or what is this thing? Oh, awesome. We can make sense of maybe something that's super scrambled up. It's my favorite way. It's my favorite way of doing counseling. But even for parents, they can do that at home too, because it doesn't take much to get markers and a paper. And one of my favorite things is you take a deep breath, you close your eyes. If what you're feeling, maybe this past day or even past hour, if there's a picture in your head, try and put it on a paper. All right, cool. It can be something very realistic, or it can be something just blobs of color. Yeah. Doesn't matter. But whatever, like just using things around your house or stuff that like if your kid's very artistic, go with that. If they're not, but they love to play sports, maybe I could just kick the ball around or throw the ball around or something like that, even with video games, like play it with them or be in the room with them and go, well, why is that character cool? Or why do you really like playing him? Well, I've noticed you played him a lot more. What abilities does he have? Oh, what's this overall storyline? Oh, that's kind of cool. It kind of sounds like your life or something that you relate to.
But Caitlyn, that sounds like you have to spend a lot of time with your kids and be intentional and
it's the hard part.
Be with them.
It very much, which is so hard for parents. Which I only have one kid. He's 3, and it's hard because me and my husband both work, and so sometimes you do just want to tap out yourself.
Of course.
But
and there are times for that.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it speaks to the pace of life, though, when we think about suicidality and kids that want to kill themselves, kids who are supposed to be joyful and full of hope and life and not even aware of all the crap that goes on in the world, to even be afraid of it, and to think things are that bad. Just our pace, just as children who are raised by people who are in a busy season of life, who all work, who all have things going on. I mean, we set that tone.
Absolutely.
We show them what's valuable. We show them achievement and work and ethic and all these things. And it causes so much tension and anxiety in them, which, doing all that, chasing after the money. And usually, I mean, most of us as parents are like, well, I'm working really hard so I can pay for your college tuition in the future, so I can provide for you this good future, so I can give you, all these things I didn't have. And yet we're missing out on giving them the things they need the most, which are that connection, that emotional intelligence, that spiritual guidance on the daily.
Absolutely.
Day to day, moment to moment. Nobody hardly sits at the dinner table anymore. We've been really working the last couple of months on like Mondays and Fridays being like dinner table time.
Heck yeah.
And so, you sit down, there's no game. We don't do screens anyway, but we do board games a lot. And so lots of times we'll be playing a board game while eating, or somebody will be at the bar. And, Uno's a big fan favorite at our house.
Absolutely.
Which I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's Uno No Mercy. Have you heard of that yet?
I actually had a client brought that in.
I was about to say, I don't know if that's a good therapeutic one because it's really harsh.
It is, because it's so harsh. It's and man, some people will be
it's like a plus 30.
Yeah, no. There's a plus 10, there's a plus 6, plus 4. You can stack. If you get like 25 cards or more, you're automatically out. Yeah. It's intense.
Yeah, if you get a 25 or more, that's what it was.
Yeah, I had a client bring that in last week, and
he swap hands with each other.
Demolished me.
Yeah,
and he was so happy. Like, we played 3 games, and he's like, "I'm done because I've won, and I don't want you to try and beat me." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine too."
Yeah,
awesome.
Right. I don't want to lose.
But man, it's absolutely the time and the connection, because it's what you're gonna be able to have in the future, and for your kid to not. It doesn't have to be like high stakes. It can literally just be like a board game night, or we watch a movie night, or we all go on a walk every night after dinner or right before dinner.
That's a good one.
And just like any time that you're able to kind of just shut up and listen, or even sometimes compel or put down that competitiveness in you and let them win. Not all the time, because they got to know that sometimes you lose.
Yeah,
but
my wife's out on that. She's not letting nobody win.
Yeah, it's my kid's not there yet, so I'll see how that goes.
Yeah, you'll see.
But
you crush their little soul, and no, I'm just kidding.
You do. I mean, sometimes, but not all the time. But to be able to, like, that'll open up conversations and be able to say, sometimes adults lose too. It's like, really? It's like, yeah, you just made me get 30 cards in one hand. This is ridiculous. I've lost. But how to model that, and you get to very much lose well, and you just get to talk to them about it, or even about other stuff, because if it's so low stakes, or if it's not as like high risk, they're going to come to the bigger things, like, I don't feel like living anymore, or I really don't know what to do with future, or like, is this a really good friend or not, or is my boyfriend like really being like, is this a good boyfriend, or is this a good girlfriend? I don't know. And so it builds on it, and it makes those times be something.
Absolutely. I mean, just as you're talking, I'm just thinking about, discipleship and being a Christian parent and what that means. And I think we've turned, so much of Christian parenting into creating well-behaved children. They make good grades. They don't cuss. They don't drink. They don't have sex.
Right.
They follow these rules. And again, some of that is great, and we should teach them about it. But the goal should be to live a life as parents that is congruent enough and compelling enough that our kids see that and want to emulate that.
Yeah.
Right. Which means we have to be following Jesus closely enough. We have to be in community with people who are following Jesus closely enough that our life reflects to our children. How do we handle bullies? How do we handle failure? How do we handle sickness and conflict with our family members? What do I watch? What kind of music do I listen to? How much am I on my phone when we're around each other? I mean, it's simple, but it's the thing that I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, most of the parents that come into our office and most of you guys listen to this podcast, that's not something we spend a whole lot of effort changing and doing and focusing on. Most of our effort in our work together goes into, again, making that money, providing safety from the dangers of the world in some ways, being scared of human trafficking, making sure that we're working hard to provide for education, and then making sure they go to school and make good grades. And it's like there's so much of our culture that we've lost as Christians that can easily be done around a dinner table, in the backyard playing, where all of these things where they're growing and learning is an opportunity for them to see you model it, but also for you to guide them in how to deal with those things appropriately and how to emotionally regulate. And so we have this other bipolar kind of thing where it's like kids are not supposed to suffer at all.
Right.
And so we curate their whole environment to where they have no difficulty. And we have now, we went from helicopter parents to snowplow parents, where now people are just going before them and just making their life easy. 2 decades ago, when it was just it doesn't matter what you think or how you feel, get over it and survive. And so I think we have our job cut out for us as clinicians when we look at suicidality and self-harm and addiction and depression, and how all these statistics are on this huge rise in teenage, years that never before.
Yeah.
To go, okay, then what is the cause? Like, what are the things that we can do to prevent these things? And I think it goes back to, well, then what have we inserted into the culture, that wasn't there 20 years ago? And it's a lot of the stuff we just talked about.
Right. And then, especially for Christian parents, when or if suicide ever comes up with your kids, of not automatically going to Judas. Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the first my church would go to was, well, Judas killed himself. Like, that's bad. You're going to go straight to hell. And it's like, okay, but I'm still dealing with this. Mm-hmm. This is bad. So I'll further not talk. Awesome. Yeah. Great. I feel even worse now. I'm just going to be just as bad as Judas. Mm-hmm. And so, instead of going to different Bible stories, I go to David a lot. And I went to David a ton when I was a teen. Because I believe my therapist actually brought that up once, of how David has so many Psalms and so much of just I am at the brink of, what is the point of this? As he's running from Saul, as he's trying to navigate different things, the loss of his kid, because of what he did with Bathsheba. And it's like, oh, so this great man, the guy who is literally called the man after God's own heart, also felt the same. That's pretty wild. That's not the first person we ever talk about. Mm-hmm. We only talk about the great things, but he felt that. Job went through so much and still was able to point himself back to God.
And his friends came in and were like, "What'd you do to deserve this?" Right?
Literally.
So that's beautiful, Caitlyn, because that's part of the problem, is that being suicidal there's levels to it.
Right.
Right. And so there's, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't know many people who haven't thought that.
At some point.
And if you haven't thought that, congratulations on having a life that has been really, really awesome.
Yeah.
You should be very grateful.
Come give me tips.
Yeah, exactly. Send me an email with how to have a life that's that way. Because if you live life, at some point you want it to be over. And I think if you're a Christian and you're aware of life and the pain of those around you, and you're discipling people and you're in a relationship with people and you have experiences, at some point, you want Jesus to come back and this to be over.
Absolutely.
This life here. And so Scripture says the whole earth moans and groans for Christ's return, and that the Holy Spirit moans and groans for us when we're in pain. And so that is suicide. By definition, I don't want to be here. I want to take my life. Where it gets problematic, I think parents need to understand, is when it moves into thoughts and actions and plans.
Yeah, when it's
so can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, so absolutely, with just thinking at some point, maybe it's something very difficult that it'd be great if like life just stopped, or if you're really tired, like if I could just have a sweet, nice little week coma, I'll be good and get a nice, good rest. But when it does move into, okay, maybe they are self-harming and maybe the cutting isn't, if they're cutting, it's not doing it. And it's like, all right, well, I need to cut bigger, or I need to cut deeper. Or there is the specific plan. It's maybe if you've seen like their search history, it's looking up maybe, how many pills of this can you take in order to kill yourself? Or what do you do with a gun to make sure that it works? Maybe it's even, seeing like starting to, maybe your kid starts giving away a lot of their favorite stuff. Like maybe it's a favorite stuffed animal they've had forever that they would never, ever let their little brother or little sister have. And it's like, well, why don't you have this? You start seeing more of that stuff and more things. There's a lot more preoccupation with death. They're talking about it a lot more, and being very, very, very aware of that, and then being able to talk about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, if you guys want more information on that, go back to episode 3, I think we did, with Trey McGuire. We did a whole episode on like prevention and suicide prevention. I think that would be really helpful for you guys to listen to. We don't have time to go into all the things because we have it everywhere else. What else you got? You got any closing thoughts, comments?
For parents that have lost their kids to a suicide, definitely not your fault. There are so many things that, like as we've touched on, that just go into it. For parents that have kids that maybe have expressed it or deal with it, and you have no idea what you're doing, you don't want to hurt them even more, definitely come to us. Or seek somebody to talk to for you and for your kid. It's really awesome. I love to tell parents, you get to have me as I'm just an extra person in your corner. So we all get to fight this together, and we get to work on it together. You're not alone. For anyone that maybe as a kid or even an adult that's dealt with this, that you are absolutely not alone, and that there's so many great things that you have yet to do. So one, stick around, please, to do them. And that, there's so many, there are so many people that would want you here. Mm-hmm. One amazing resource is called 988. It's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. They actually have a call center and a text center. So you can text the number there. It's 24/7. It's free. They have trained, skilled crisis workers that reach out to you. I talked to one back when I was 16, and they listened. They just asked like what was going on, maybe if there was something like really big that happened, or like what has just led me to call them and think about this. And then they connected me with different resources. They do that as well now, even with text messages or calls. They'll connect you to local things that are available, as well as providing resources not only for you but your family. Maybe you're a kid and you're calling your parents, or the parent is calling, they're like, I don't know what to do. They'll connect you with resources. And just sometimes medication is helpful. Sometimes your brain just needs an extra help because there is something going on. Mm-hmm. Doesn't have to be forever, but it's okay that maybe there is some help that is needed in that form. But that there are other options. There are tons of options, and you can always have someone in your corner to help you. And you don't have to go through it alone. That's
good. Thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening. As Caitlyn said, if you have anything that you need, that you're struggling with, if you're an adult or a child who's dealing with suicidality, or just feeling like, I just don't want to be here, please act on, getting help now. That, like we said earlier, let's not make a temporary problem a permanent solution. We have seen thousands of people in counseling overcome depression and anxiety and fear and thoughts, OCD thoughts. I promise you, whatever you're thinking about or have done or are dealing with is not any worse than anybody else. You are not uniquely broken. There is nothing, Scripture even says this, that is a sin or that is a struggle that is of man that other people haven't been tempted with or haven't dealt with. And so that lie is from Satan. That lies from the world, that lies from our own flesh and our own doubt and our own brokenness. it is not true. And so come get help, reach out to someone, reach out to us. We can look up somebody in your area, get help today. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until you're all the way at the sense of feeling like it's over. If you're feeling sad and depressed and anxious, get in with somebody, talk about something so that you can kind of lower, those symptoms and lower those fears and those anxieties so it doesn't lead to suicidality. And then if you're on the cusp, man, you are, like Caitlyn said, worth it. You have purpose. God has a plan for you. He's promised to work those things out in you, and He will complete them in you, those good things. So just remember that. We love you. God bless you, and have a good week.